300 miles southwest of Delhi, in the heart of the vast and mostly arid state of Rajasthan, lies a golden city, Udaipur, called the City of the Rising Sun. This is a romantic land, the land of the great fighting clans of India, the Rajputs. Since the beginning of time, if we are to believe the legends, the Rajputs have walked hand in hand with the gods of war in their mountain strongholds that overlook the great deserts to the west. Here in the City of the Rising Sun, you will find the most proud and the most ferocious of the clans, the Mewars. For 1400 years, the Mewars were ruled by the family of this man, the Maharajah of Udaipur, whose forebear, so ancient histories recount, was the sun itself. Here in the City of the Rising Sun lives the direct descendant of the sun. The Maharajah lives in a great palace by a lake. When it was built 4 centuries ago, it marked the end of the long guerrilla war against the Mughals, who had already conquered most of India. Henceforth, they left each other in peace, and on the banks of Lake Pichola, the still unbeaten Mewars built their golden city. Here, and in a summer palace on an island, their kings were to live in unaccustomed peace. But for the senior noble of India, and the latest in the longest ruling household in the world, times have changed. With India's independence, he handed over control to the new republic in return for certain privileges and a government pension. But in 1972, all was finally swept away by the needs of the world's largest democracy. All, that is, except his palaces and the memory of power. For the descendant of the sun, now plain Mr. Mewar, a new day has dawned. But long ago he had foreseen the loss of his status. And when Queen Elizabeth had lunched with him here and had suggested that he open the island palace to tourists, he had taken her advice. People will tell you that he created the most beautiful hotel in the world. Today in the courtyard, visitors are entertained where his ancestors once relaxed with their chieftains, surrounded by tamarind, lemon and orange trees. "13,000 men had labored for 6 years to build a marble paradise suitable for the king who sat on this throne 400 years ago. This was their heritage, these Ranas, Maharajas and Nawabs, who until recently formed the richest and most elite club the world has ever known. Their wealth was stupendous, and from ancient times they ruled with absolute power over more than half India. Rare paintings from the Maharana's treasure tell of this glorious past. The princely states grew to their most exotic shape under the British, who took what was there, and through political agents like Colonel James Todd, encouraged their growth in return for the prince's support. Todd also wrote a history of Rajasthan, and we can see that the palace looks now exactly as it did centuries ago. Today's honeymooners enjoy the sensuous surroundings of a suite where the Ranas of old reclined with their harems. Delicate ghosts remind us of Rajput beauties long since forgotten. But the lotus-scented breeze reminds us of a love story that will never be forgotten. It had its beginnings across the lake in another island palace called Jagmandir. Here a young prince once took refuge from his father, a great Mughal emperor, and was guarded by the massive sentinels of the still proudly independent ruler of Udaipur. India is a land of legends, a magnet for today's visitors. But India is also a land where streamlined modernity blends with tradition. And it is this harmony that attracts travelers to Bombay. for interwoven with its ancient history, the traveler finds evidence of a nation that is powerfully coping with 20th century problems, building modern palaces for modern needs. Another sign of change is that many of the old palaces have been converted into hotels, and the visitor finds that he can relive these old stories while surrounded by modern comfort. Even the fabulous Jagmandir Island is to be converted, this little palace that was built especially for the young rebel prince. Here he found sanctuary until he himself became the Emperor Shah Jahan. He sat on a throne sculptured from a single block of serpentine, and probably this place was the inspiration for the Taj Mahal, which he later built as a memorial to his great love. It is said that no man loved a woman as the emperor loved Mumtaz Mahal. The emperor's grandmother was herself a Rajput, a princess of Amber, which is not far from Udaipur. Men in their thousands must have toiled at the walls that bind the great fort of Amber to make it impregnable. But the dramatic arrival of the young Mughal emperor, who was Shah Jahan's grandfather, for his marriage to the princess of Amber, who was his grandmother, meant an alliance between Rajput and Mughal after centuries of bloodshed. For the Rajput womenfolk, the approach of the young emperor and his retinue was momentous. For the first time, they threw rose petals instead of the thunderbolts of war. Here in the Mirror Palace, high up in the recesses of Amber, the bridal couple shyly sat, while the Rajput women celebrated the promise of peace with dancing and singing. And a kind of peace did follow, such that the Rajputs were able to leave the great hill fort of Amber for the spacious plains below. Today's traveler sees that Amber is a city that will never wake, unless, like you, he is lucky enough to see the ghost of the old empress, while Jaipur, 7 miles away, throbs with life. Prince Jagat Singh of Jaipur, the descendant of those old kings of Amber, runs a discotheque in the Rambagh Palace. This too was turned by the family into a hotel some years ago, anticipating events. India is a nation that loves to dance and celebrate. And far away to the south in Mysore state, you will find the greatest of the Indian festivals, Dussehra, whose ancient history is woven with the family history of its central figure, His Highness the Maharajah of Mysore. A man of learning and ability, Mysore must have been the most opulent of the princes of India. His government pension alone was 150,000 a year, and this was a small fraction of his income. But in 1972, this too was taken away by the needs of democracy. Here he celebrates Dussehra in the throne room of his great palace for the last magnificent time, for he will not be able to afford the cost of the spectacle again. This is the most solemn moment of the ceremony, the blessing of the great gold throne of his ancestors. It is said that the throne drives away the weakness of old age, fatigue and fear for those that dare sit in it. Its value must be incredible. It weighs half a ton and is studded with diamonds, emeralds and rubies, hung with pearl tassels and decorated with figures in solid gold. And so the Maharajah bids farewell to his guests, ambassadors from many countries. For the last time, he has offered worship as mediator between the people of Mysore and their gods. In antiquity, the festival was woven into the worship of Indra, the god of thunder, war and rain. And the last day is Indra's day of victory over the evil powers. On this day, there is a great procession, and the processional objects are blessed by the Maharaja's son. The state elephant represents Indra's elephant, who guarded the gateway to heaven. The state horse is Indra's horse, who came forth at the churning of the ocean in mythology. Indra's gold chariot was drawn by 10,000 reddish-yellow horses as speedy as the wind. The great chariot cleaned the sky and filled the corners of heaven with a din like the clash of thunderclouds. Even the more modern chariots are blessed, for if the rites are properly carried out, it will ensure public prosperity during the coming winter. In days gone by, 1,000 trained fighters, armed like tigers with talons in their palms, would battle before the Maharaja until they dropped. Now there are 4, and they cease their fighting when blood is drawn, an auspicious sign on Indra's day of victory. And when the state weapons are blessed and placed in the gold palanquin, they too, the sword, the bow and the trumpet of war, symbolize Indra's weapons. All the world loves a parade, and scores of thousands flock to watch this spectacle as it winds its way through the streets of Mysore for 4 hours. The saying goes that people who have not met for years are sure to meet at Mysore during the Dussehra festival. Night falls long before the procession reaches the parade ground. And when the state elephant arrives, this special moment is tinged with sadness, for the Maharaja is not in the howdah as he used to be. But when the great elephant trumpets a fanfare, it is also a salute to the future. The people have always had their festival. And when the Maharaja's massive palace is lit by 100,000 lights and the city responds with a firework display, we know that though kings may come and go, there will always be a Dussehra festival at Mysore. Since without the sun, human life could not exist, the Hindu believes that it symbolizes the ultimate truth of God. And along the banks of the great Ganges at Benares, devout Hindus pray daily to the rising sun. It is said that Benares is the oldest city in the world. And though it is the holiest of Hindu cities, people believe that anyone, of whatever creed or however great his misdeeds, who dies within the city walls will go straight to heaven. Which is why so many travel to Benares to die, and why you will find a gold-roofed Hindu temple next to a Muslim mosque. Along the river towers the great and crumbling palace of Ramnagar, which was built around the temple of a famous saint who had settled there. His Highness the Maharajah of Benares, whose palace this is a deeply religious man, a philosopher and a scholar of renown. And if he is able to survive today with some of his old status, it is because he stands for the people around as their religious representative. Once he was a king, and under the old feudal system he wielded enormous power over his subjects. Today he bids farewell to the emblems of his power and privilege as he plays the leading role in the month-long festival of Ram Leela. Perhaps for the last time, he travels with his son in his ivory coach around the boundaries of Ramnagar. In case of mishap to the delicate ivory coach, a more recent relic brings up the rear to carry His Highness back to the palace. He makes this daily journey to be seen by and to greet the pilgrims who have traveled to be present at the festival. Holy men in their hundreds, who have probably traveled hundreds of miles, are camped beneath the walls of the palace. These sadhus have given up all worldly pleasures and all belongings for the spiritual life of the ascetic. Many of them are naked sadhus, who have given up their clothes as well. These are the elite among holy men. Physically and spiritually, they are the toughest of all, and they frequently begin their apprenticeship very early in life. The Maharajah's son, too, is being brought up by his father in the most orthodox Hindu way.